The Ozone.
Welcome to the Ozone Podcast with Jaguars senior writer John Ozier.
All right, welcome into this week's Ozone Podcast, and I think it's going to be a special one for people who are on the internet, on social media, probably hearing that our guest today, Jeff Howe, who's the national insider for The Athletic, has written an outstanding story on Jaguars head coach Liam Coen. And there's been a lot written about Liam, but this one was special. Goes into his relationship with his late mother, Beth, his father, Tim, who's around the Jaguars a lot. And specifically, it's the first time Liam has really talked about the death of his mother by suicide in 2006, I believe it was, after dealing with pretty devastating effects of Lyme disease. And I think I've got the details of that right, Jeff. First of all, appreciate you doing this. And you had told me right before we started this, you've known Liam. You went to UMass with Liam and have known him for a long time, and said it was a really special story to do. And again, I don't know if congratulations is the right word, but outstanding job on the story.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and I've known Liam for 20 years, and our paths continue to intersect, but it's, personally and professionally. But we've had a personal relationship for about 20 years, and it started professionally is a loose term because he was a college quarterback and I was a college reporter. But,
right.
I covered the UMass football team for the the Massachusetts Daily Collegiate, and I still remember his first appearance. Tim Day was the UMass starting quarterback at the time, and Tim got hurt. And Tim is Ryan Day's brother. Okay. Ryan Day, the Ohio State head coach. And Liam comes in, and they had a really, really good roster. And you just needed good, smart quarterback play, and you got a redshirt freshman coming in, and you weren't sure what was going to happen. And the next thing you know, the guy's playing phenomenal football. And that it's just sort of took off from there. But somebody that I grew close to, just, from a coverage perspective, the quarterback is obviously going to be somebody you want to talk to. But
sure.
Really started to get a good relationship with Liam and a lot of players and Don Brown and the coaches with that program at the time. I mean, it's UMass football. At the time they were in 1AA, so it's not like there was a lot of media around. Even when they had that national championship run to the 1AA finals a year later, there's only so many reporters who are around, and
right.
Certainly so many who care. So it was easy to kind of realize that we were like-minded people. I mean, there were a bunch of days that I spent in the football offices, just talking with the guys, learning the game.
Sure.
I mean, I've said it a bunch of times, publicly, privately, to these people. Like, Don Brown has taught me more about football than anybody I'll ever meet, because he always cared to take the time to explain things to me. And, Liam was very similar. And, I can't even tell you how many times I'd be hanging out with Liam in the coach's office, and Don would step in, or vice versa. And next thing you know, you're spending a couple hours just shooting the breeze with some people down there, and just trying to learn as much as you can. And here we are, 20 years later, and I brought this too.
Right.
This is a magazine that I was the editor of, The Score. So as the sports editor of the student newspaper, I was responsible for putting that out in the spring of '06, right before I graduated. We chose Liam as the cover athlete with Brandon Thomas, the basketball player there. And that picture right in the middle of the campus, right in front of the Minuteman statue at UMass, in a very well-traveled area. I want to say it was like a Thursday in the spring on the afternoon. So, there are thousands of kids walking around, going to class, coming from class, whatever. And you've got Liam in full football uniform next to the biggest statue on campus. It was a really funny sight.
That's fantastic.
And I know that's a magazine that my friends still have copies of it. I know Liam's family still has copies of it. So it's one of those things that a bunch of us will never forget.
That's very cool. It's and not to belabor something from 20 years ago with Liam's mom, but it was such a moving story to read. And I guess having known him and having been talking to him when he was discussing this, it sounds like such a a cliche question, but what is her memory meant to him and in that relationship? Because it was special, and you did a great job talking about it in the article.
Yeah, I had no idea about the tattoos, to be honest.
Right.
And so when I asked him about it, and he immediately showed me his wrist and her signature, I was really like blown away by that, and just it's a way for him to, of course, channel her anytime he's able to. And another part, I saw his wife Ashley tweet that before every home game so far this season, a butterfly has flown to the sideline where he's been, and they look at that as Beth coming in to check on him. I mean, just there are some things like that happen that I don't know.
Sure.
If you want to think to a higher power or just what have you, it's pretty wild to see things like that. I mean, I know there are signs with people that we've lost in our lives, and you see stuff like that pop up, and
sure.
you just have that feeling that that's somebody trying to let you know that things are going to be okay. But I know personally for me, I had spoken to Beth. I still remember. Okay. I don't remember how many times we had spoken, but I vividly remember one conversation that I had with her, and it was for like 45 minutes to an hour. And I called the house looking for Tim, and I don't think he was home yet or what have you, and wound up talking to Beth. And it wasn't for a story or like an interview. It wasn't anything like that. It was just
she was just that kind of person, which comes across in the story, by the way.
Yeah. She was an outstanding person, just a beautiful soul, and just. We were talking about school and homework and classes, and she wanted to know how Liam was doing and stuff like that. So when I say that, I always I put a lot of pressure on myself to write features that have sensitive topics. Mm-hmm. I put a lot of responsibility on myself to make sure that the subject is comfortable and happy with how that story turns out. That's incredibly important to me. And there are times when I have my process that I go through when I write features, and it's not as frequent anymore, but
sure.
This one was different because it was personal, and it meant a lot to make sure that the legacy of Beth and the way that it was read by the family, it hit the right chord,
right,
and it was delivered with the respect that it absolutely deserved and needed.
And I'm quite sure how to ask, but why do you think, or when you were talking to him, what sort of gave you the impression that he was sort of ready to talk about this now? And that may not be a fair question because you're not him, but he had not talked about this publicly before.
Yeah. Through our connection, I've known the story for since it happened, and it was going down to Jacksonville 2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever it happened to be, recently, of course. I wanted to write a story about the person, Liam Cohen, the person.
Gotcha.
In a way that I could write it, and I wasn't sure what the direction would be. I went down there. I'm with pages upon pages of different types of topics that we could address, and not knowing how much time we were going to have to hit on all of them, just trying to fire off one at a time. And Liam, he laughs at himself. He loves to talk, so sure. You could ask a question, the next thing you know, you're 7 minutes later, and it's like, all right, I have 16 different follow-ups, but that might take up our entire window.
Yeah, there's a passion for educating that I'm sure came from Beth. I mean, because he can educate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I just asked. I was curious if he was comfortable speaking on that topic, and he was. And I really appreciate that. And I've told him that, and I really do. I appreciate anybody who's willing to not just open up about a sensitive subject, but to almost welcome me as a person who they trust to tell that story.
No doubt.
And I don't ever take that lightly. There's just so much responsibility in when somebody is going to trust you with information like that. They deserve to have that story told the right way. Mm-hmm. And I tried like crazy to make sure I was able to do that.
No, it showed.
Yeah.
and I don't want this question to be a cliche, but in getting to know Tim a little bit, because he's around a lot, and I don't pretend to know him, but you could tell what kind of guy he is, I think. You mentioned it, and I just met Liam when he got here. But you can really tell, I knew he was going to be a good offensive coordinator, and a good play caller. What you didn't know about him was how he would connect to players, because as you know, you've covered the league, that's the most important thing, and not every head coach can do it, because a lot of coordinators can't do it because they've been coordinators all their lives.
Yeah.
He has been obviously unbelievable at connecting with the locker room and being a leader, which you just don't know about a head coach. I'm assuming that Tim and Beth, the upbringing, everything, to me, that's got to be a huge part of why he's top tier at that.
And that was truly like the goal. And if we didn't address, the really sensitive stuff about Beth's story, that was still going to be part of the subject, just growing up with this family.
Right.
Because again, like I've seen it. I've seen how quality these people are, and this family is, and what a quality person Liam is, and always has been. He just is. And so, you just wanted to make sure that however he wanted to go about it, let's just try to make sure that we show people a side of Liam that I've been fortunate enough to know for 20 years. And it's easy to get lost in, some of the side stuff. I mean, it drove me crazy when like the Duval thing took off. Right. Like I understand it, but I was like, man, like I just want people to see that like there is a completely a much more genuine, sincere side of Liam that is going to make him a successful head coach. The fiery stuff with Saleh after the game, like those are all genuine parts of these are parts to him. He's not going to shy away from who he is as a person.
Right.
But like there are these other sides, and they're not going to draw the attention just because that's just not the way that some of these. It's not the way the news cycle works a lot of times.
Right.
So it was how can we go there and do this the right way, if that's the way that he wants to be able to do it. And that's just really how it all came together. I think there was something else. Oh, just in terms of like the coaching and who's going to be successful. I covered the Patriots from 2009 to 2021 before I transitioned into our one of our top NFL reporters. And I really started to learn or gain more of an appreciation for how difficult of a job it is to be a head coach, and especially the first time guys, like the amount of commitments that they have that have nothing to do with football, that they have to take on, especially in the off season. It's like through the roof. There's just so many different people pulling you in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, you're not coaching anymore, you're managing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So like I can rattle off probably 10 people in the last 5 years who I was convinced were going to be really, not 10, 10's probably 5 to 7 people who I was convinced were going to be good head coaches, and it didn't work out. And maybe it was because of their own mistakes. Maybe it was because of organizational issues, whatever. It could be any reason. You truly never know. Mm-hmm. And, the next big challenge, well, I mean, aside from like the second half of this season is going to be an extraordinary challenge for the Jaguars to continue trying to make a push for the playoffs. But there's going to be that challenge when the roster has to reset again in going into year 2. You look at Brian Daboll, who had a really good first season with the Giants, and then you get a little further away from that previous regime, and the roster starts to turn over a little more. You want to bring in more players. Sometimes that success is not always in a straight line. Right. So there are always these different types of challenges and levels of adversity that coaches are going to take. But it was cool to see the Jaguars start off successfully, to have the high-profile wins against the Niners and the Chiefs, to beat the Chiefs on Monday Night Football for the whole world to see, and to kind of let the league know that, yes, this guy can coach. And, I I don't want to blow smoke and say that I knew that he was going to be a head coach in the NFL or whatever, but I certainly started to wake up to that fact when he joined the Rams, and I saw how much Sean McVay appreciated him. And then you see the way that McVay's tree started to go out and have success on their terms, and knowing that eventually the clock was starting to tick on Liam's time.
Right.
And then he has all that success as the play caller for the first time with Kentucky, which is a huge challenge, and he was great at it. And kind of back and forth between the Kentucky and the Rams, and then having all that success in Tampa. I thought once things started to go really well in Tampa, it was only a matter of time before he became a head coach.
Sure.
And you're seeing the Jaguars are currently reaping the benefits of the way that he is able to connect with players and to scheme up an opponent.
What I'm not sure if this question applies. We talked about a lot of it, but I'll ask it anyway. I know from writing the kind of story that you wrote, you research a million things to get to 5 or 6 things that you can really emphasize, right? Anything that you didn't get in the story that you would want people to know about Liam?
Oh my gosh!
Probably
I think
too
I had
much. I get
somewhere
it,
between.
Yeah,
I had like 8,000 and 10,000 words of quotes, and
Right.
I think it was a story that probably didn't surpass 2,500 words. So there was I could write like a half a book
Sure.
off of the stuff that I had.
right. That's why I say it's probably unfair because you know him. You know him so well that there's so much, but it's again. I'll ask you. I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, look, I'll go back. I'll tell anybody who will listen. He was a damn good college quarterback.
Right.
I mean, he kind of takes a shot at himself in that story. I immediately was like, man, you're not giving yourself enough credit. Like, he was a good player for a high quality UMass team in the 1AA level. I mean, they didn't go to the national championship by fluke. That
Right.
was something that was years in the making, and great coaching. Phenomenal defense. I mean, Brandon London was his top receiver before Victor Cruz. Brandon London won a Super Bowl with the Giants in 07. Like, this is a team that had a lot of James Ahedebo started in the Super Bowl for the
right.
Patriots in 11. There were some quality players on that team, and it was like he just had to come in and play decent football and play responsible football. And then it eventually kind of morphed, and it turned into, hey, this guy's pretty good. Let's kind of expand the playbook. Let's start throwing it deep to London and Jason Peebler and Rashid Rancher, a bunch of guys who
Right.
not a lot of people on this podcast had heard of, but Steve Baylark was a really good running back, and they were a really good team. But he was a good player. He knew how to manage the game, but he had a really accurate ball. He was smart. He knew where to put it. He didn't turn it over. He did everything that you would want out of a quarterback, and I truly believe, or I shouldn't say that. I wanted to see what it would have been like if he had a chance. Like, if it weren't for that elbow, what
Right.
would it have been like if he got a chance in an NFL camp? And I'm not saying he was going to be a starter or anything like that. But, I keep going back to, I just used this example somewhere else. Like, Brian Hoyer was an undrafted free agent with the Patriots in 09 when I started covering them. And winds up beating out, I think Kevin O'Connell. And
Right.
there were like 4 quarterbacks on that roster in 09. He wasn't beating out Brady, but he beat out everybody else to the point where they only carried 2 of them. And then Brian Hoyer had a really good NFL
Right.
career,
Nice little career.
primarily as a backup. And you just wondered if Liam's instincts and smarts and creativity with the offense was going to be able to lead the way for that type of success. But, the elbow had other ideas.
Sure. What? Just a final thought. We talked about Beth a lot, as we should have. Tim's around here a lot. What kind of influence do you think he had on?
Oh, massive. And it was,
unbelievable. Yeah. Clearly.
yeah, he was, because you see both sides of him, and especially in the story, I was happy with how that came out, because you got the tough and rugged side as the football coach, and the dad he's got that old school mentality. And the grandfather has that old school mentality. I mean, there was a part of the story where Tim opened up about how he had a heart attack in Florida at age 22, and when his parents were flying down to go visit him in the hospital, Tim was like, "Well, I can't make them nervous. So
Right.
even though I just had a heart attack, I need the nurses to kind of let me know when they're walking down the hall, so I can prop myself up and show everybody that I'm okay." And there were just, stories like that. But then, there's the softer side. So, you're talking about, Northeast football, whether it's at Salve Regina, where Tim was the first head coach, a D3 program, or the high school stuff, or, you kind of go through the New England circuit where Liam was, Brown, URI, UMass,
which
Maine.
is a big deal up there. People down here don't realize it, but that's a big deal up there.
Yeah, but like these athletic departments don't have a lot of money, so they're especially at some of the smaller schools where these athletes are lucky to get a couple pairs of shorts and a T-shirt. You gotta like sign out like a pair of ratty old gym shorts. Like these are places that don't have the luxury stuff that you get at a lot of the bigger programs down south. And so Tim would go to the URI and Brown and the other colleges in the area and just say, hey, do you have any old equipment that you're not using anymore, because I want to give it to some kids in the neighborhood or in town who can't go out and afford it.
Right.
So he would like wander around and just start giving out cleats and shorts and T-shirts, and it might give a Brown T-shirt to somebody and URI cleats to somebody else. But hey, now all of a sudden that kid's got a little college football pride in somebody close to him, and maybe he wants to come out and give football a try. And it was, Tim always wanted to look out for his players. He had them over the house a lot. Was always like, tried to set them up if they needed money, with work to get a job, to try to make sure they weren't getting into any trouble anywhere. Sure. So he looked out for them, and he noticed that was going to help them play harder for him. And you look at the way Liam operates, he had a quote in the story. It was like, if I could get these guys to play hard with me, it's going to make my job easier. And a lot of that stuff kind of continues to hold true with him as a coach. As a first-time coach, he was very much aware that he is going to have some shortcomings. It's hard to figure out how to manage a game and be the head coach and call plays and be in charge of timeouts and replays and all this other stuff. He's going to make mistakes. But if these guys see how hard he works, and he doesn't have a chair in his office. He doesn't want to sit. Like, he has a chair around some tables, but he does not have a chair at his desk. So he's not a guy who's going to sit down. He's always going to be bouncing from room to room and throwing creative ideas at people. And Josh Hines Allen was saying something like, I know he's not a defensive coach, but he can talk to me about defensive stuff, and I know it's not just him regurgitating something that somebody else just told him. Like, he's speaking from knowledge. And I'm not going to throw anybody else under the bus, but I can think of coaches who were put into situations where they were trying to fake it, and players see through that.
Seen that.
And there are, if you want that old school hardcore mentality, no nonsense, it's my way or no way, that doesn't work in the NFL anymore. Otherwise, you need an unbelievable amount of credibility already built in, and it's just guys want to play for coaches who are invested in them as people, and you're going to see more and more and more of that. You already are, but that's been one of the biggest changes in all of coaching, I think, in the last 10 years, more so in the last 5, and somebody like Liam is perfect for that. Yeah,
that's an outstanding place to close, because it's sort of what I've been searching for in terms of, when you look at Liam, that's the nut graph right there, right? I mean, like, he is the guy who can connect with these players because of the credibility he brings in. And it's hard, as we with the Jaguars have been trying to sort of, tell his story. Part of it is the locker room speeches. Part of it is, just having him on the podium and hearing him. But Jeff, your story and you saying these things today sort of weaves through that, and it shows that what we're saying, what we're showing is real, right? I mean, like, you've seen it behind the scenes. So again, outstanding job in saying that in your story and on this podcast. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. I'll say my running joke with him is, I coach my daughter's 5th grade soccer team, and I was like, man, you got to stop stealing my post-game speeches. So we got to get him to come up with your own stuff, man. Like, I gotta stop sharing with him what I'm saying to the team, because it's, word for word a lot of times.
Yeah, I'll bet it's word for word. Hey, Jeff, I can't thank you enough. I know you took about a half an hour out of your day to do this. I know you're promoting the story, but it's also above and beyond. Again, outstanding story. I know how hard it is to write those well, and you wrote it very, very well. Thank you for joining the Ozone Podcast, Jeff.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.